Chapter 6, The Irony. Now folks, brace yourselves, because I will take you on a journey into the depths of my teenage mind, where I speak about my mental scars and the unfortunate prejudice I had towards a demographic of women at the time. "1978, the style of music known as disco was tearing up the dance floor. Grease was a major blockbuster hit. This was the year that I would experience 3 discoveries that would have a major effect on my dating journey. In the previous chapter, I spoke about Janice, who gave her perfectly entitled opinion of calling me ugly. But she was not the first female to do this. It was in fact my mother. Now, despite some of my father's flaws, he came to my defense, but that didn't really matter anyway, because the words had already left my mother's mouth. Though I acknowledged the positive part of my mother's character, such as bringing us up with good morals and manners, along with her being willing to help me and my 2 brothers in any way she can. And I am eternally grateful for the positive side of my mother's character. However, it was very difficult for me to ignore the negative side, such as the few times when I was a kid, when she would get annoyed with me and say, "You're going to grow up to be a road sweeper, and I'm going to watch you." And as I mentioned previously, she was quick-tempered, easily offended. I had to tread on eggshells constantly when I was around her, because I just simply didn't know when she was going to pop off or lose her cool, just because I may have said something in the wrong tone, or she may have just misinterpreted something. So I learned as a child, a young child, my life was a lot easier just keeping my mouth shut and keeping my thoughts to myself. And as I said previously, she planted some unfortunate seeds and left me with some mental scars, because it's one thing for a non-family member to call you ugly, but for your own mother to call you ugly, that did leave a few scars with me. And unfortunately, I never really developed a bond with her. Yes, I loved her as my mother, of course I did. But I wasn't close to her, not close to her at all. Even when she passed, I felt nothing. I didn't feel no loss. I didn't miss her, and I still don't miss her. Now, back in 78 in Drayton Manor High, most of the black girls were of Afro-Caribbean origin like myself. Now, understand, I take no pleasure from saying this, but with some of them, not all of them, and I shall repeat for those who are difficult of hearing, not all of them, but with some of them, I found them quite scary. Scary in the fact that I've seen their cruel mouths in action with the victims who may have made the wrong joke or said the wrong thing to them, which reminded me of my mother in terms of some of the traits they displayed. Now, during lunch break in school, there was the reggae room. Now, this was quite a fun place to be, because people would bring their vinyls in and play on the record player, and I would sit quietly in the corner, people watching and listening to some of my favourite reggae records. As much as I loved the reggae room, I was very aware that I avoided any interactions with some of the black girls in the reggae room. They were quite boisterous and loud, and as I said before, I found them quite scary. Now, I really hate to say this, but I'm only being honest about my state of mind at the time as a teenager. But I found their boisterous, loud nature and some of the traits they displayed reminded me of my mother. I found them undesirable. I didn't find them undesirable in the way they looked, quite the opposite. In terms of how they looked very appealing, very pretty in a lot of cases. But I just found them undesirable in terms of the way they came across. Now, I gladly put my hands up and take accountability for my prejudice, because I'm sure in most of the cases I was wrong, And if I just gave them the chance, or if I just spoke to them, I would have probably found that they were nicer than the impression that I had of them. But I was a teenager. I didn't have the verbal firepower that I have now, so I wouldn't have been able to handle what I perceived as their cruel tongue if they turned it on me. So, alas, it was what it was. Now, during this time, a craze came over from the United States of America, and it hit the UK youth like a tsunami. That was skateboarding. Now, my younger brother and me, we were in the thick of it. We got so into skateboarding, we developed some skills. And around my neighborhood, there must have been around 10 to 15 kids with skateboards. And our immediate skateboard gang, there were about 5 of us. Then we heard about this place in central London, adjacent to the Houses of Parliament, called South Bank. So we made our way to South Bank. And when we got there, it was like skateboard mecca. I can't remember exactly the number of kids there were on skateboards, but it's at least 30. And there was just kids everywhere on skateboards. It was amazing. But this was not the only thing that I had noticed. And of course, naturally, the Houses of Parliament, with its Big Ben and Westminster Bridge over the River Thames, attracts a lot of tourists. Now, our skateboard gang had been skating for a few hours at South Bank and decided to take a little rest. I remember sitting on a wall with my back to the Thames, and a group of young girls were walking by. Then something happened to me for the first time in my life. One of the young girls at this group, she looked up at me with her blue eyes and short blonde hair, so just above shoulder length. She looked at me directly in my eyes, and she gave me one beaming, flirtatious smile. And for the first quarter of a second, I was like shocked. I was like blown away, thinking, she looking at me like that? And she was gazing at me as she was walking past with a smile on her face. And I smiled back, and I remember turning away in embarrassment. And I remember something happening to my face, strange feeling happening to my face. And I realized I was blushing. Lucky for me, I wasn't white, because I would have gone bright red. Now, due to the amount of activity there is on South Bank, you've got ice cream vans, you've got stalls that sells hot dogs and stuff like that. People tend to walk up and down, and this group of girls who are clearly foreign, don't ask me how I knew, because I didn't speak to them. I didn't have the courage to speak, but I could tell by their dress sense, their energy, just how they looked, their body language. I knew they were not English. They definitely came from somewhere in the continent. But they walked past us maybe 3 times, and every single time the same blonde one would look directly at me and smile at me that same flirtatious way. Obviously, being a teenager with no experience, I didn't pick up. I mean, I knew she liked me, of course. It was clear she fancied me. But I didn't have the skills and the know-how to execute an approach. I just kept on turning away. I was so embarrassed. Now, you need to take into consideration my low self-esteem and my lack of confidence at the time, due to the scars that I had acquired and due to some of the way I had been treated by some of the girls in high school. Being presented with overt choosing and flirtation signals, I was like a fish out of water. Absolutely didn't know what the hell to do. Now, of course, nothing happened between me and this young girl. However, every time we visited South Bank, I noticed I was getting eyed up by foreign girls. It was either at South Bank or on the way to South Bank or in the surrounding areas of South Bank. I'd catch the eye of a foreign girl. He'd properly eye me up. Sometimes they'll smile at me, but this time, obviously, I wasn't as shy as the first time. I'd smile back. But I noticed the pattern every time we went to South Bank. And I started to conclude that these foreign girls must be seeing something appealing in me that the local girls wasn't seeing at all. Well, that's how it seemed at the time. But it wasn't until a little while later that I noticed the interest started to expand to some of the local girls. Now, to my knowledge, none of the local girls that showed me any interest post that skateboard era were black. Now, this brings me to the irony. In the years to follow, the women who hail from the countries that has a reputation for being racist towards black people, such as Spain, Italy, Poland, Lithuania, had shown me the warmest welcome, the most overt interest of all the women I had encountered throughout my life. Whereas if I had to take stock of the women who gave me the most negative response, unfortunately it was the black women, especially when I visited my parents' island of Grenada in the mid-80s, when a few of the women took it upon themselves to call me too black and ugly, which I shall touch on in a chapter yet to come. The reason why I speak about all of this is to present another side of the story, a notion that I normally hear regarding interracial dating. The notion I normally hear is a one-size-fits-all approach, where I hear a lot of black women say the reason why black men date outside their race is because they don't find black women attractive, which doesn't apply to me at all. To cut a long story short, the irony is, in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, I simply received a warmer welcome from elsewhere. And with basic human nature, you're going to naturally gravitate to where you feel more welcomed. Now, if I may, fast forward 47 years to the current year 2024. In my lived experience here in the UK, I have observed there are four main reasons why black men date outside their race. We'll start off with the misconception of the one-size-fits-all theory that black men don't find black women attractive. Now, of course, this applies to some, but this does not by a long way apply to all. Reason number two, it's simply a case of who they meet at the time, and that's it. Reason number three, in situations like myself, they've just simply received a warmer welcome from women outside of the race most of the time, and so out of habit, they're just drawn to where they feel more welcomed. And reason number four, I call isolation, where you've got a person who's grew up in a neighborhood that hardly has any other black people there. Could be somewhere in the Shires, could be deep in Cornwall or somewhere like that. And they just haven't had the exposure to black women. And it's simple as that. So in closing, my message to those who run with the one-size-fits-all theory, my advice is, instead of telling black men what they think, I would advise you to simply ask them what they think. My first discovery of 1978 that played a vital part in my dating journey is that some girls were really into me while others were really not. One woman's meat is another woman's poison.